So now, if we turn to a sample of what he wrote, and I found it exceedingly tedious to translate this, and you may find it a bit tedious to listen to it, but it'd give you a taste, at least, of his style and his approach, and perhaps give you an appreciation of the opinion that his work is primarily a reference work. It's an encyclopedia of tafsir. When you need to know something specific, you go to it and you have to plow through and you have to skip lots of stuff. It's not the kind of book that many people would read from cover to cover. So here's what he has to say about Surah Al-Fatiha. We're not even going to get to Surah Al-Fatiha. Actually, it took 5 pages for him to deal with Bism and Allah in Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and he hadn't finished it when I gave up translating. So anyway, here we go. Surah Al-Fatiha is Meccan, and it consists of 7 ayahs. And then he starts Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And he says the statement regarding the ta'wil of Bism. Abu Ja'far said, "Verily, Allah, exalted be His remembrance and hallowed be His names, taught His Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the proper etiquette of mentioning His beautiful names before all of His deeds and before starting any matter of concern. And He made that etiquette and that teaching a normative practice for all of His creatures when they start speaking and at the beginning of their letters, books, and needs, to the point that the apparent indication from the statement of a speaker, Bismillah, suffices in place of what is implicit of his intention, which is unstated. That is because the ba in Bismillah grammatically requires a verb that calls for it, and there is no verb actually stated along with it. Knowledge of the speaker's objective suffices anyone who hears him say Bismillah, that is, from wondering, it suffices the hearer from wondering what the missing verb is. Okay, I had to add that. Because the statement is always accompanied by some matter, either right along with it or immediately before it, without interruption. It indicates the reason for stating it. It is like when someone asks a person, "What did you eat today?" and he replies, "Grain." It is obvious enough to any listener that he meant, "I ate grain," without his having to repeat, "I ate," along with his answer, because the listener heard the question right before the answer. Therefore, it is reasonable that when someone says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and immediately after that begins reciting a surah, that his follow-up of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim by recitation of the surah is based upon the meaning of his statement Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and it is understood from it that he meant, "I recite with the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful." Similarly, when he says Bismillah just before standing up or sitting down or any other action, his intent in saying Bismillah was, for instance, "I stand with the name of Allah," "I sit with the name of Allah," etc. What we just stated in ta'wil of that is the meaning of Ibn Abbas's statement, which Abu Qurayb reported from him. And then he quotes the isnad, and what's relevant of that is that it's a narration by al-Dhahhak an Ibn Abbas. And as we mentioned in an earlier lesson, al-Dhahhak didn't meet Ibn Abbas, so that means that this isnad is mursal, it's weak, because there's a break in the chain between al-Dhahhak and Ibn Abbas. Anyway, al-Dhahhak reported from Ibn Abbas that the first thing with which Jibreel descended upon Muhammad ﷺ, he said, "O Muhammad, say, I seek refuge with as-Sami' al-Alim, the all-hearing, the omniscient, from the accursed Satan." Then he said, "Say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim." He said that Jibreel told him, the he here I suppose is Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas said that Jibreel told him, say Bismillah, O Muhammad. He says, recite with the remembrance of Allah, your Lord, and stand and sit with the remembrance of Allah. Again, this is Ibn Abbas speaking. So, Abu Ja'far said, someone may say to us, if the ta'wil of his statement, Bismillah, is as you stated, and the grammatical actor upon the ba in Bismillah is as you stated, how then was it stated, Bismillah, to mean I recite with the name of Allah, or stand or sit with the name of Allah? And you know that every reciter of the Book of Allah does so by the help and enablement of Allah to recite, and that everyone who stands or sits or does any other act, it is by Allah that he stands or sits or does any other act. If that is the case, then why wouldn't the statement be Billah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? By Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Why is it phrased Bismillah, with the name of Allah? For a speaker to say, I stand or sit by Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, or I recite by Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, is clearer in meaning to a listener than the statement with the name of Allah. For his statement, I stand or sit with the name of Allah, gives the impression to the listener that his standing or sitting was by the concern of other than Allah. Now, after posing that question, al-Tabaree says, the response to that would be that you have misunderstood the meaning of the statement. The statement Bismillah only means I start by naming and remembering Allah before everything, or I recite by invoking the name of Allah, or I stand or sit by invoking the name of Allah and remembering Him. The speaker does not mean by his statement Bismillah, I stand by Allah, or I recite by Allah, such that the statement, I recite by Allah, or I stand or sit by Allah, would be more befitting than the statement Bismillah. Now he continues this dialogue with this imaginary interlocutor. Interlocutor just means someone that you dialogue with. He might say in response, if the matter is as you've described it, how could he say Bismillah when you know that the word ism is a noun, while the word tasmiyah, meaning to name or invoke the name of, is a masdar of the verb samma? Okay, Abu Ja'far says, the answer is that the Arabs use an undifferentiated, mubham, masdar in association with various nouns, as in their statement, akramtu fulanan karamatan. I honored so-and-so honorably. And here the masdar, karamatan, it's from the thulathi root, the three-letter root, whereas akramtu is from the form for. And when you use a masdar in that way, that's called ism masdar. You're not using the form for masdar, you're using the original root masdar. And it's when you use the masdar in that way, it's used to add a type of emphasis. So after that, I didn't bother to translate that. Al-Tabaree then embarks on some involved explanation of the use of ism al-masdar. He quotes various lines of poetry, 3 samples, to show that this is indeed the way the Arabs use the language. He then said, examples of this sort abound, but what we have mentioned should be sufficient for whoever has been enabled to understand it. If the matter regarding the Arabs' use of ism masdar is, as we have stated, that they use it profusely, then it should be clear that our explanation of Bismillah is correct. That when someone says it just before doing or saying something, he means, I invoke the name of Allah before my act or statement. The same holds true for when someone is starting the recitation of the Qur'an and says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He means, I start my recitation by invoking the name of Allah. He uses the word ism in place of the masdar tasmiyah. A statement in accord with this interpretation of ours has been transmitted from Abdullah bin Abbas. So again, he quotes the isnad that ends with al-Dahak from Ibn Abbas, And the same report, that the first thing with which Jibreel descended upon Muhammad ﷺ, he said, O Muhammad, say, I seek refuge with As-Sami'ul Alim from the accursed Satan. Then he said, say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He said, Ibn Abbas said that Jibreel told him, say, Bismillah, O Muhammad. Ibn Abbas continued, he says, recite with remembrance of Allah, your Lord, and stand and sit with remembrance of Allah. This ta'wil from Ibn Abbas is based upon the validity of what we said, that what a reciter means when he opens his recitation with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is, I recite by invoking the name of Allah and remembering Him. And I commence the recitation by invoking the name of Allah and His most beautiful names and exalted attributes. It also requires the invalidity of the claim that it means by Allah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in everything. In light also of the fact that the slaves have only been ordered when starting any matter to invoke the name of Allah, not to speak about His greatness and His attributes. This includes the order to invoke Allah's name at the time of slaughtering animals and hunting, and before eating and drinking, and before the rest of their acts. The same holds true for what they've been ordered to do, invoking God's name before reciting His revelation, and at the beginnings of their letters and books. There's no difference of opinion among all the scholars of the Ummah that if a person at the time of slaughtering an animal says Billah instead of Bismillah, that he has violated by failing to say Bismillah the normative practice that has been prescribed for him at the time of slaughter. It is known from that the claim that Bismillah means essentially Billah is incorrect. For otherwise, a person who says Billah at the time of slaughtering an animal would be considered to have done what was demanded of him in that regard. This is not the place to go on at length to clarify whether a name is the same as what it names, or something else, or is it an attribute of that which is named, for to do so would lengthen the book. This is a famous issue in Aqeedah between the Mu'tazilites and others. It was an issue that was sort of brought on the radar screen of scholars by the Mu'tazilites. Anyway, he continues, this is, however, a place to clarify whether the name that is related to Allah by the idafa construction, mudaf, mudaf ilayh, is a noun or a mustaq. Someone may say, what do you say about the line from a poem by Labid ibn Rabi'a? In Arabic it says, إِلَى الْحَوْلِ ثُمَّ اسْمُ السَّلَامِ عَلَيْكُمَا. To the end of the year, then the name of as-salam upon you both. وَمَنْ يَبْكِي حَوْلًا كَامِلًا فَقَدْ اعْتَذَرَ. There's no vowel marking, so it might be فَقَدْ اعْتَذَرَ or اعْتَذَرَ. Anyway, it's either the passive or the active voice. And that second line would mean, and whoever cries for a whole year is surely excused, or it could mean, or has surely asked for pardon. That's based upon my surface knowledge of Arabic language. Translating poetry is very difficult. Anyway, to continue with Tabaree, he says, for someone knowledgeable in the Arabic language, oh no, this is not Tabaree speaking with his own voice. He's recounting an argument of his imaginary interlocutor. Someone knowledgeable in the Arabic language, and he doesn't quote him because he's going to embarrass the holder of this opinion. I mean, he doesn't identify the person who gave this opinion because he's about to just demolish the opinion, and so he doesn't want to, I guess, embarrass whoever said it. Someone knowledgeable in the Arabic language has explained that this line of poetry, that it means, then as-salam be upon you both. So now, al-Tabaree replies, it would be said to him, If that were correct, and it was permissible to say so, it would also be permissible to say, I saw the name of Zaid, or I ate the name of food, or I drank the name of drink. The consensus of the Arabs that it is impossible, or not allowed, indicates the error of the interpretation of Labid's statement that ثُمَّ اسْمُ السَّلَامِ عَلَيْكُمَا means the same as ثُمَّ السَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمَا, and that the idaf of the word ism is only permissible in such circumstances when the name of that which is named is exactly the same as that which was named. Those who accept the statement mentioned above should be asked, do you permit in the Arabic language that it be said, I ate the name of honey, meaning thereby the same as I ate the honey, as you have permitted it to be said, ثُمَّ اسْمُ السَّلَامِ عَلَيْكُمَا, to mean the same as ثُمَّ السَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمَا? If they say yes, they have exited from the Arabic language, in other words, from the proper use of the Arabic language, and allowed in the language what the Arabs have universally declared to be an error. If they say no, then they should be asked, what is the difference between the two? For they can't make a judgment about one of them without being bound by it with regard to the other. If someone were to ask us, what is the meaning of Labid's statement according to you? We would reply, it implies two possible meanings, neither of them the interpretation you earlier mentioned. One of them is that as-salam is one of the names of Allah. Labid may have meant the two of you should adhere to the name of Allah and leave off remembering me and crying over me. The whole statement being an expression of enticement, ighra. Thus, the noun was made nominative and the particle that indicates enticement was pushed back in the sentence. In fact, as far as I could determine, it wasn't mentioned at all in the passage quoted. The Arabs do that when the enticement is pushed back and that which is being promoted is moved up, even if it would be in the accusative case if it were mentioned after the particle of enticement. Then he goes on to cite another line of poetry as an example of that usage, and then he repeats his assessment of the meaning of Labid's statement. And then he continues, says, the other interpretation is tasmiyah of Allah upon the two of you. As when someone sees something that pleases or amazes him and says the name of Allah upon you, invoking the name of Allah to protect that person from evil and harm. So it is as if he said, then may the name of Allah be upon both of you against evil. It would seem that the first of the interpretations is more likely to have been Labid's intended meaning. And here he turns now to sort of attack again whoever it was that gave this interpretation that he disagrees with. It would be said to the one who interpreted Labid's statement to mean, as-salam be upon both of you, do you think either or both of the interpretations we put forward are possible, or some other explanation besides the two? If he says no, his level of knowledge regarding the ways the Arabs use their language has become clear, and it is no longer necessary to debate him. If he says yes, then he should be asked, what is your evidence that the interpretation you propose is the correct intended meaning rather than the alternatives we propose, such that we must defer to your interpretation and accept it? There is, in fact, no way to accomplish that.